Yeah, great. So the topic today really is what makes the ISDM experience transformational. I've just put together some thoughts around that on a PPT just for ease of use, and I'll keep moving the slides ahead. So the overall structure is fairly simple. We'll start by talking a little bit about development and development management, move into issues surrounding higher education today, and how the one-year program at ISDM, or the PGP in Development Leadership, is looking at addressing some of these issues, and really how that will help create a transformational experience for all participants. And the third section really is expectations, both pre and post ISDM. So what are we really looking for in students coming for this program, and what can students look for post ISDM? The idea of this webinar today is not to go into the program in detail. There's another webinar that we have planned next week, which will go into the program, the structure, the objectives, term by term, and looking at some of the various elements which go into making this program what it is in a little bit more detail sometime next week. Is that okay? Before we start, I just want to see if people have any quick thoughts or comments around this, because that's generally going to be the structure of this conversation. Great. So let's move ahead. Let's start with the first section on development and development management. So, clearly there are two parts to this discussion. What is development, and then what is development management? Now, if you look at the dominant discourse around development, a lot of it is centered around what we call economic development. And that's really what the country largely talks about. That's what's really mentioned a lot on page 1 of newspapers or in news channels. So concepts of GDP, concepts of per capita income, poverty, etc. But the concept of development itself is much more complex. It's much more multifaceted, and we could actually spend days and weeks trying to determine what development really is and what is the goal of development. Depending on the lens that you use, we could talk about social development, we could talk about cultural development, political development, physical development. For example, malnutrition is a huge issue in the country, and 2 out of 5 malnutrition children in the world come from India. So physical development and issues of stunting and wasting are huge in the country. Or ecological development. So there are many different ways that, or many different kinds of development that we can really talk about. But at its core, I think at its simplest best, development really focuses on human beings and looks at creating the right kind of conditions for human beings to achieve their maximum potential. To get even simpler than that, I think the development sector as such essentially exists to improve the lives of people. And for me, that really, in a one line, is the goal of development and the goal of the development sector. The concept of development and what it really means has evolved a lot over time. So right from the roti kapda makan ideology of the 60s and early 70s to the provision of what we call HDI parameters, which is basic education, basic healthcare, etc., to now more evolved concepts of how do we create politically active and politically aware citizens. So how do we create more active citizens who can then participate in decision making in the country and help decide the future of the country? Development as an idea has really gone a huge transformation. But at its goal, and let me go back to what I said earlier. But the goal remains the same. We exist to improve the lives of people. Now, the question that comes when we say something like this is which organization or which sector really doesn't exist to help improve the lives of people? If you talk to people in the corporate sector, and I have lots of friends from that space, everyone exists to improve the lives of people. So what makes this a special preserve of the development sector? While there can be many answers to that, I think there are two leading parameters which really call out to me. The first parameter really is the target pool or the beneficiary pool or the target segment or whatever you want to call it. For the development sector, we're really looking at working with and working for people who are the marginalized and the underserved segments of society. Whereas for the corporate sector, the target pool really is people who can pay for their services. That's one very, very big difference. The other big difference is that most of the work that the social sector does is really critical to the lives of this target pool. Whether it's environment, whether it's education, whether it's health, whether it's prostitution, whether it's trafficking, whether it's addiction. There is very little of what the corporate sector does can actually qualify as being critical to life and death. So these are, really top of mind thoughts around and fairly simplified thoughts. As I said, we could spend days and weeks, but for the purpose of this discussion, very simplified thoughts around the fact that one, development is really complex. Trying to resolve the learning outcomes issue in this country, or trying to, work on, air pollution or the ozone, or working on things like drug addiction or alcoholism or trafficking is so hugely complex. So it's hugely complex, it's multifaceted, it has a fairly clear goal, and it's very clearly differentiated from some of the other spaces around this. Now, in this space and in this context, why is management important? And what does management even really mean? So the sector's been around for a very, very long time, right? The idea that besides the government, we need another sector which really focuses on some of these really basic areas for human development has been around for a while. And the sector has largely believed that you give us good quality technical talent and you give us money, and we are good to go. And I think those two are really, really important for the success of the work that is being done by the sector. However, over time, I think what that has resulted in is tons and tons of organization, and today we have thousands and lakhs of social sector organizations who work in pretty much in silos. So we have education related NGOs, we have health related NGOs, we have environmental related NGOs. So it's resulted in thousands of organizations which work at a fairly local level, work really well with communities, understand issues at a local level, and are able to evolve and implement solutions at a local level. But how many organizations do we have which can actually then take those solutions at the local level and try and scale them and make them relevant for the entire country of 1.2 billion people? The answer is very, very few. How many organizations do we have which have moved beyond being founder-led and founder-dependent organizations, where almost the existence of the organization is largely dependent on the founder? And if something happens to the founder, or the founder moves on, then a lot of the work done by the organization collapses. The organization struggles to survive, and therefore the impact made by the organization also fizzles away. So how many people who've made that move from founder-led to professional-led organizations? The answer is very few. How many organizations today are in some ways household names? We know, for a fact that there are many, many corporate organizations which have today become household names. Of course, the consumer-facing brands like a Coca-Cola or a Pepsi or an ICICI Bank, it's understandable why they are household names. But even a lot of non-consumer-facing organizations, for example, an Infosys or an Adobe or many others which are not consumer-facing brands, are also very, very well-known organizations. But how many social sector organizations have been able to tell their story and really inspire people by their storytelling to actually come and work on these really important and complex issues? The answer is very, very few. And how many organizations have been able to move beyond working in silos and trying to solve social issues from a very sectoral lens to starting to understand social issues from a more systems thinking and design thinking perspective? The answer is very, very few. And I think that these realities, and there are many more, but I think these realities really lay the ground for why development management is really, really important, and it's a concept whose time has come. It's a concept, where the sector is now increasingly recognizing that this is really important and is increasingly starting to demand talent of this kind. The next, most logical question is, well, great. You say that management is required for the development sector. Then, why not use business management graduates? So, why is an MBA not an automatic choice for work of this nature? Whether it's organization building, whether it's looking at issues from a systems perspective, whether it's building alliances and collaborations, whether it's looking at issues from a systems perspective, etc. And I think the answer is in some ways related to how MBA has evolved and how it's become a discipline and a profession in its own right. The roots of this really lie in capitalism and in the Industrial Revolution. And the entire discipline has evolved from that. So there is a certain context in which the discipline is really relevant. And that context is very different for example, the corporate space and the development sector. So the first point clearly is a huge difference in an articulation of what the end goals are. And I've done this exercise many times in open sessions where we ask people, what is the objective of the corporate space? And it's beautiful because it's so simply elegant. People say it's profit, and it's bang on. But if you ask people, okay, what's the objective of the development sector? It's not that easy to articulate. Even the concept of improving lives is actually situated in the overall more complex idea of a good life. And people on this webinar today, if we had to have a discussion over chat on trying to define what a good life is, I'm fairly confident that we'll all come up with our own definitions. So just an ability to even understand, this idea of a good life, and understand what the goals are and really start appreciating and working in that ambiguity is something that is very, very different between these two sectors. The second clearly is the importance of values. At least what it should be. And I think the way dev sector work needs to be approached, and especially organization building in the dev sector needs to be approached, is from a very clear grounding in what we call universal human values. Whether it's equality, whether it's equity, whether it's social justice, whether it's fraternity, whether it's liberty. I think the framers of our constitution have articulated a lot of these values in the preamble to the constitution. Differences could arise from the way you look at human beings. The term HR or human resource in itself quantifies human beings as resources. So you have financial resources, you have physical resources, you also have human resources. And therefore, I look at human beings as entities, which can contribute to me achieving an outcome, versus looking, at them as autonomous beings or human beings who have agency, who have a will, and who have a right to make decisions on their own. And there are many others. I've mentioned some of them on the slide, whether it's a top-down command control culture or versus a more participatory culture. This is really a big difference between the way these sectors really work. Whether it's on the nature of stakeholders, whether it's where on one side investors are your singular focus of stakeholders in the corporate space, but in the dev space, I think the stakeholders are much more comprehensive, and each stakeholder is very, very different from the other. Or a question of time horizon, where the ability to actually look at things quarterly versus having the patience to work with complexity and ambiguity and look at longer time frames is a very, very different mindset. So I'll take a break here before going into the next section. This was a very, very brief overview of development management, and how development management is really different from the broader idea and more accepted idea of business management. I'll take a break. In case there are any questions and comments at this stage, we'll take them up now, and then we'll move on ahead with the next section. Anyone? Again, the audio bridge is on, and the chat window is on. So if you have any comments as well, you could share that, and I will share it with the rest of the people. or if you have any top of mind questions on what we've shared till date, we are happy to take that up as well. Great. Let's move ahead. So silence typically means either of two things. One, it could mean that things are crystal clear, which is a great place to be in, or it could mean that none of it is making sense and one doesn't know where to start from. I'm really hoping that it's the first one right now. But again, having said that, please feel free to share your thoughts and questions, and we'll take it up as time comes. Okay, we have a question from Preeti. She says, as the sectors are different, would the values and qualities of people working or who want to work in the sector would also be different? And what would they be? Preeti, that's a great question. Thank you very much for that question. So, one of the questions I ask people when I spend a lot of time in interactions is how do you define, one, how do you define success for yourself? And two, how does society in general start defining success for you? And the answers to these two questions are remarkably different. So while the societal questions really deal with things like money, society and status in society, and the car you own and the house you own, and what you wear and the kind of holidays you go to. When you ask people what does success mean to you or how do you want to be remembered, most people really talk about the fact that they want to make a difference in people's lives. They want to be remembered as someone who made, who added value to people, as a good human being. And the fact that these two answers are typically drastically different is something to really think about. So I don't know whether the values and the qualities of people working in different sectors are different. I think it's almost a choice that people have made on what to give more weightage to. A lot of my friends, I come from the corporate space as well. I spent a few years in companies like P&G, American Express, and a lot of my friends continue working in the corporate space. And they look at me and tell me, "Hey, you seem to be having the time of your life. You're doing something so meaningful. ISDM looks so exciting." And I look at them and say, "Hey, really, what stops you from making that transition yourself?" But not everyone is able to make that. For some, there are life realities. For others, it's just the inability to break the shackles of society and to start really looking at what makes you happy, and do that. So instead of saying that people are fundamentally different, I think it's almost choices that people have made which are fundamentally different. There are a lot of people who make a choice saying, "Hey, I want to do what makes me happy. I don't really want to get sucked into what the society qualifies as success." Some people take that choice at the age of 21. Others take it at the age of 35. The others who take it at the age of 50. And really, whatever works for you, I think, never let anyone else judge you. I think it is your choice, and it's up to you to make that decision whenever you're comfortable to make that decision. So I hope that helps answer your question, Preeti. We can take it up later as well. Rishi has asked about scholarships. Rishi, we will take up questions on scholarship, etc. later. So Shobhan says, is development management a concept that originated in India, or are we also inculcating values from other countries too? So Shobhan, as an idea, development management or not-for-profit management or NGO management is an idea which is talked about a fair bit across various countries in the world. But what we've seen typically is that a lot of that discourse is around contextualizing development management, contextualizing business management to this sector. Whereas the way ISDM talks about development management is how do we actually create ground up an entirely new body of knowledge which is unique for the development sector. That's really how any new development, any new discipline is created. That's how design as a discipline was created, by working on the ground with practitioners, theorizing on experience, and developing an entirely new body of knowledge. So, to your question, yes and no, it does exist, and we are trying to learn from what's happening across the world. But we also, are cognizant of some of the limitations of those approaches and are trying to look at it in some ways with a very, very fresh lens. Ayana says that the challenge is to bring about the money that's present in the corporate sector into the development sector sustainably. To keep the best people, they need to be paid well enough, a concept a lot of people need to understand. Completely agree with you, Ayana, and I can say with a fair amount of confidence that this specific aspect is changing drastically and dramatically in the development sector. So if I was talking to you even maybe 6 or 7 years ago, definitely 10 years ago, I would have completely agreed with you. I think today the entire idea of the dev sector being way beyond just NGOs or being way beyond just grassroots NGOs is now a reality. So one, the number of different kinds of organizations, right, from domestic NGOs to international NGOs to CSR, which is corporate social responsibility, to corporate foundations, social enterprises, social consulting organizations, funding organizations, the government. So now the number of different kinds of organizations trying to do different kinds of work that exists in the space today gives people with different kinds of aspirations, different kind of skill sets, aptitudes, attitudes, a space to really work in this sector. Earlier, the sector was in a lot of ways a lot less inclusive, or I would say maybe required people with a certain kind of mindset and background. Today, the sector welcomes people from a variety of different mindsets and perspectives and backgrounds, and therefore even the ability to earn very, very decent salaries and lead really dignified, meaningful lives is very, very much present and possible in the sector today. Again, something I'm really fond of saying, that if you want to work on extremely complex problems and really help make a difference to people, then this sector is the right place for you. It gives you the opportunity of doing that while leading extremely dignified lives. You will never be left wanting, for basic necessities, for even more than basic necessities. I mean, there are enough organizations in the sector who pay a fair bit. However, if money making is what really drives you, and there's nothing wrong with that, then you should work in the corporate space, because the corporate space will always pay more than the dev sector. Both of these are not contradictory to each other. One, the dev sector pays enough to lead very, very decent lives. Two, the corporate sector will always pay more than that. Right? Great. So let me. Thanks a lot for the questions. I think they were great questions. Rishi, we'll come back to your question later. Let me move ahead very quickly to the next section, which is really around innovations in higher education and in some ways lays the ground for what makes the ISDM experience really transformational. So if you look at higher education, and we've all gone through higher education, and we've had a varied experiences really in higher education. But if I were to generalize, there are some things which really come out. And now over the last couple of years, we've had the opportunity of meeting hundreds of people through, one, our interactions that we do, and two, obviously through the application and admissions process. And some of the things have really started hitting us much harder than they used to. For one, I think higher education is really theoretical and fairly divorced from reality. A lot of programs leave students asking for more. Leave students with the inability to make connects with what's happening in the world outside. There's very little industry or sector connect, and faculty are largely academicians, a lot of whom have never really worked in the space. There's a lot of one-way communication, and a lot of ways, in a lot of ways, what we're doing right now today, and really the absence of focus on developing higher order critical thinking skill sets. There's a lot of, largely a lack of a higher purpose. So higher education has really become just a means of getting a job and making money, not necessarily of developing people who can think critically, people who can reason on their own, not a means of developing active citizens, and really not a means of developing people who can really take decisions of their life in a fairly objective manner. And that really leads to the last point, is that one of the biggest factors which is missing in not just higher education but education throughout is just a lack of focus on understanding of the self. Just I think so many of us are completely not in touch with who we are as individuals. What do we bring to the table? Who are we as human beings? What are the values that we stand for? What are the non-negotiables in life? And a lot of us really just flow with life in that sense, and education is not playing a role, at least as strong a role as it should, to make us think in that particular manner. And I think these were some of the questions when we were looking at designing the 1-year PGP in development leadership. I think some of the questions that we were looking to address were these. So if you look at the program, really, there is a huge focus on praxis. The entire program has been conceptualized, developed, and delivered by practitioners and social leaders. This is, and we strongly believe this, and we say this with a lot of confidence, that this program is really for the sector, by the sector, and of the sector. This is not a program which is being developed in isolation, in parallel to the needs of the space, but in close collaboration and close partnership with the sector. And there's a strong connect, within the program with field level realities and with sector organizations. We obviously have a component called Realizing India, which is a 2-week, a 2-week district rural immersion. We have the concept of a residency, which is an 8-week problem-solving engagement with a partner organization. We have our partner organizations actually coming and engaging with us on a variety of different ways, right from engaging with us on research to engaging with us by coming and teaching. So being faculty, to coming and giving lectures and sharing about their lives, their successes, their failures. And it's a huge high for our students to actually hear them and learn from their journeys and learn from their experiences, besides trying to understand the kind of work that their organizations really do. Secondly, we are not, this entire thought around, a program really helping people think through and understand who they are and what they really want to do. We are not confused in our positioning. So we are not a management program with one course in development. When we started this entire idea of development management and development leadership, a lot of people said, oh, so is it an MBA program with, say, one course in development? Definitely not. Or is it a social work program or a development studies program with one course in management or org design? And we said, no, definitely not. I think these are two things which are really enmeshed in each other. So a lot of the initial time in this 1-year program is really spent on, understanding what development really means. What is development? How has the concept evolved over time? What are the various lenses through which you can look at development? Who are the stakeholders? What are the challenges of working on the ground? What are the roles of the various stakeholders, especially understanding government and governance as an important idea, etc. So understanding the context of development and really trying to develop empathy, for the segment of people that we are looking to work with. And the second portion I talked about in the earlier slide was understanding the self. Is really understanding who you are and what you bring to the table. And that's a very, very important part of this program. The third, and we talked about how higher education is really one-way communication. The experience at ISDM is really about participation and about equality. So students are active participants and not passive receivers of information, and they really come and participate and set ground rules and set culture on a variety of things, right from discipline to course design to how placements are run, the kind of culture we have at ISDM. We have what we call hot conversations, and hot really means honest, open, and transparent conversations on a variety of different things, and on the way we do, way we conduct this program at ISDM. I think as human beings, and that's something that over time has been borne out through various studies. We are actually not competitive by nature. I think collaboration comes a lot more naturally to us. But the entire education system and how we've, really been tuned, or in some ways indoctrinated from childhood, is to look at things very competitively. I think that's something we want to break at ISDM. So a lot of the pedagogy, whether it's group work, whether it's what we call problem-based learning, is just part of how we do things at ISDM. It's just a way of life. So how do we get people to work together? How do we get them to start appreciating each other? How do we get people to start, realizing the power of collaboration? Because I think the realization is that in the development space, if you're not able to create the right kind of partnerships and collaborations, there's just no way you can bring about sustainable social change at scale. And that's really, really one of the defining elements of ISDM's one-year program. And lastly, really the joy of problem solving. I think, again, that's something which comes inherently to us. You look at children and you look at how they, how they approach life. In general, you'll find that they love, solving problems. So you give them something, they'll try and figure ways and means around how to do it. That's something that as we get adults and we get adulterated, we start taking a lot of things for granted. A lot of the knowledge is then just passed on to us through this one-way communication. And I think at ISDM, we're trying to change that. So there's a lot of intense research, debate, deliberation to try and develop, your own point of view on what's happening around you, your own point of view on real life organizational building issues for the social sector. That's we've talked to our students now in the first batch, and I think increasingly the collaboration and the problem solving bit again and again come up as significant experiences for themselves over this 1 year. We'll take a break again before we move into the last section. Again, opening it up for any questions, any comments, any thoughts that you'd like to share.
Partners or organization, the kind of leaders are there. This lower and
anyone, anything? So Ayana says, can you tell me more on how ISDM teaches, works, understands the government as a tool in order to bring about scalable, sustainable change? So Ayana, I'm not entirely clear on the question. So let me take a quick stab. So on what I understand from it. So Ayana, I think we have a lot of people coming in as part of our faculty pool who have worked closely with the government. So we have people who work very closely with the government as researchers, as practitioners, as academicians, as bureaucrats who actually come in and share their understanding of the government. And the challenges of the government, or working with the government, and the challenges of working within the government. So what are being the government, what are the challenges? It's so easy when we as outsiders actually, it's really easy for us to point fingers, right? But we also get to understand what it means to be part of the system, and what are the challenges of being part of that, and how do we actually then understand that and work better with the government. All of that actually, all of these efforts come from the basic belief that the government is a key stakeholder, and I'm intentionally not using the word tool, Ayana, but using the word stakeholder. The government is a key stakeholder in this entire work in the dev sector. Without the government, it's almost impossible to envision scalable, sustainable social change. So we do believe that the government is a very important stakeholder, and we make all efforts through either programs like Realizing India, where our students spend 2 weeks on the ground actually interacting with and learning a lot from different aspects of the government at the district level. So whether it's the district government or the taluk level government or the gram panchayat level, so Zilla Parishad, Taluk Panchayat, Gram Panchayat, and really understanding what their roles are and what their issues are, to getting more and more people who've had the experience of working in and with the government come and teach. Hope that helps. I don't know if that's a question that you really asked. Paresh asks, what kind of previous experience would be beneficial for this program? Paresh, I'll take that up in the next section that we are now getting into, where we talk about the kind of people who've come into this program and really what are we looking for in terms of our student profile. So let me go ahead and then we'll come back later for questions. So really, who are we looking for? So it's fairly simple. I think these 3 or 4 points that we've written on the slide kind of captures the summary of who we are looking for. We're clearly looking for people who are deeply passionate about social change. This is a 1-year intense, rigorous, robust program. There's a huge investment, and I'm not talking about financial investment, but I think investment in terms of time, effort, emotional investment, investment of passion that all of us at ISDM really make with each one of our 60, 65 students over the course of this 1 year. And I think that's something that our entire student pool will vouch for. I can say that with a fair amount of confidence. So we're definitely looking at people who've made up their mind that this is the sector that they want to build lives and careers in. There are lots of ways to bring about social change. There is the belief that, hey, I want to work on the ground, work with communities, understand issues at a local level, and really help implement solutions at a local level. For people who really want to do that, we recommend courses like social work. There are people who say, hey, I'm an academic and I want to help create new knowledge for the social sector. For people like that, we actually recommend programs like development studies. There are others who say, hey, but I want to work at the policy level. And we say, hey, that's great. And if you believe that policy is the way to bring about social change, you should do programs in public policy or public administration. But we are looking at people who believe in the power of organizations, organization building, and really systems thinking, who really want to do some of the things that we talked about, whether it's their ability and their desire to look at social issues from a systems and a design thinking perspective, whether it's their desire to provide the right kind of strategic inputs or create organizations with the appropriate strategy, structure, systems, process, culture, whether it's their desire to actually tell the stories that the sector has and really build brands in this space which will make this space aspirational. That's the kind of that's in some ways our belief and our theory of change, and that's what we feel the sector really needs, in addition to some of the other things that we talked about. So if you're that kind of person, then you're someone that we're really looking for. Obviously, someone who we see in organizational leadership positions, or someone who we see as social entrepreneurs in the near future. So Paresh, to your question, as to what kind of work-ex would really be relevant, the ideal student in that sense, and let me maybe go to the next one and I'll talk about that. The ideal student is really someone who's maybe spent 3 to 5 or 2 to 5 years, or has work-ex about say 2 to 5 years, and has spent some time in the social sector. Having said that, let me talk about the profile of our first batch. So our first batch is really, really diverse, and it's diverse on multiple parameters, right from geography. So we have people from across 17, 18 states in our first batch, and from all parts of the country. We have an almost equal mix of men and women. And I say men and women because, on an average, I think our students have about, as I said, about 2 to 5 years of experience. We have people who come from a variety of different educational backgrounds. So about a third of our batch, current batch, are engineers, a third come from a variety of arts backgrounds, and a third come from a variety of backgrounds like social work, like sciences, commerce, law, etc. And most importantly, I think a bunch, I think more than 80% of our batch are really people with work experience. I would say about 35 odd percent are people with 0 to 3 years of experience. About 38-40% are people with about 3 to 8 years of experience. Maybe about 7-8% are people with more than 8 years of experience, and about 15 to 20% are people with no experience. They are undergrad and postgrad freshers, but they are typically people who have done something in this space. Either they've volunteered, or they're in the process of setting up an organization, or they've moved beyond just intent to some kind of action. We also have people, by the way, who've not worked formally in the social sector, but are moving from the corporate space. So people from IT backgrounds, lots of people from the TCSs, Wipros, Infosys of the world, and other corporate backgrounds who've said, hey, this just doesn't make sense to me. I want to do something which is more meaningful, which is more challenging, which is more interesting, fulfilling, and yet will give me the ability to lead decent lives. And I think that's a call that they've taken to actually come into ISDM. Moving ahead, so what will our students really, and you notice I'm not going into the program. As I said, today's webinar was not so much about the program in detail, but next week's webinar will talk about the program in more detail. But moving ahead, so what kind of work will our students really go out and do? Many different kinds, and I think we are increasingly getting more and more traction around these kind of roles. So whether it's from program management and operations to overall strategy and database decision making, to communication and brand building, fundraising, working in the CEO's office. So a lot to do with planning, monitoring, managing M&E, partnerships and alliances, CSR, government advocacy, founders of social enterprises, etc. So it's when I look at these roles, there's a lot of these roles which are current roles, and therefore there are a lot of people from a variety of backgrounds who are going into these roles. I think the nature of the program and what our students go through in this 1 year fundamentally changes how they start approaching some of these roles. And as we speak today, our students are on the field for their 8-week problem-solving engagement with a partner organization. And already, even in week 2, we've started seeing, them actually looking at things in a very different way from how typically people have been looking at issues. So their ability to question, their ability to look at things more critically, their ability to look at each other and say, hey, let's work together instead of working against each other. Their ability to look at social issues from a more cross-sectional perspective rather than in silos, I think makes a lot of difference in the way they will be able to add value to these roles. Who will our students be working with? So really a variety of different kinds of organizations, and some of the names out here are just samples. I think they were more for my reference, lest I forget some of them. So I think what's interesting is the variety. So right from domestic NGOs to international NGOs, to CSR and corporate foundations, to social foundations, to social enterprises, social consulting or ecosystem organizations. I think that width is fairly mind-boggling, given that we are a fairly new organization, fairly new educational institution, fairly new program, but a kind of buy-in that ISDM has been able to get, I think, is more representative of the fact that there's a huge need for talent of this kind, and the quality of the batch which is actually coming. I also talked about the lecture series that we do at ISDM. We've had CEOs and leaders of some of the best organizations in this sector who actually come in and talked. Whether it's CARE India, whether it's Oxfam India, whether it's GAIN India, whether it's Bharti Foundation, whether it's Digital Empowerment Foundation, whether it's Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So, the range has been really, really wonderful. And we've not been able to actually accommodate as many people as we would have liked to. And probably the next batch will start much earlier to give more and more people the opportunity to come in and share, and our students the opportunity to really learn from them. The admissions process, and I think a lot of people have asked this question, is fairly simple. There's an online application form along with a statement of purpose, followed by a telephonic interview, and then followed by a written test and a personal interview. Post which we then get into a huddle internally where all the founders actually come together, and each of our applicants is discussed in a fair amount of detail before we actually make a decision on who to offer to. And I think this process has so much of rigor that though it takes a lot of our time, but I think that's something that we are really really committed to. The SOP itself, I think, really needs to talk about why, what's your interest in the dev space? Why do you want to work in the dev space? And why do you make a great student really for ISDM? In terms of scholarships, and Rishi had asked this question earlier on, one of our enduring principles, and something that we really believe, is that if you make it through the admissions process, then money should not be a reason that someone doesn't join ISDM. And that's really a commitment that we made to ourselves and to all our students. With that in mind, we are offering a 25% tuition scholarship or a tuition waiver to all our students for this batch. Over and above that, students have the option and the opportunity to apply for scholarships above that as part of the online application process. And those applications are then taken up for discussion during the personal interview stage. So we are absolutely committed to ensuring that deserving candidates do not go away due to financial reasons. We are also working with the bank, really closely with the bank, to make sure that where we are not able to provide scholarships based on our criteria of merit and need, students are able to take loans at fairly favorable terms. And given the fact that ISDM is not an expensive program at all, and that's something I think we consciously try to make sure, so that students of ISDM must go out and work in the sector, and money should never be the reason that a student of ISDM does not go out and really try and bring about sustainable social impact in the sector and for the lives of people. So that's something that we are also working on. Moving ahead, I think that really is a quote that we live by. It's a quote that, if you come to ISDM, you'll find is probably one of the first things that you will see. Something that we talk about all the time, that, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Thank you very much. I will go back now for your questions, and take whatever questions there are post that. So Mridul, who's one of our students, is also part of the webinar today, and he said, Gaurav, after learning at ISDM, there's also a huge scope of setting up our own organizations, NGOs, and social enterprises to initiate cultural and systemic shifts for tackling social challenges. Thank you, Mridul. Thank you so much for adding that. I completely agree with you. That's a big part of what our students will actually be doing. Mridul also says we are learning to see the challenges from the system thinking perspective, and government is one of the most important stakeholders of the development process. Absolutely. Thank you, Mridul. Noel has added a question. He says, I'm not sure if I missed this in the beginning. Can I know who all are behind the ISDM initiative? Who are its backers? Is it supported through philanthropic support? So, Noel, if you go through our website, a lot of this information is given there. So there are 4 of us who actually started this journey together. So I'm Gaurav. There's Ravi Sridharan, there's Suparna Divakar, and there is Sharad Agarwal. We come from a mixture of backgrounds, but all of us have a fair amount of development sector background. Suparna has pure play dev sector background. Sharad, Ravi, and I come from a mix of corporate and dev sector background. We are from the typical BITS, IIT, IIM backgrounds. But beyond us now, the people supporting ISDM is a huge list. From our board of directors to the philanthropists who are backing us. We are a not-for-profit as well, and we have a fairly huge list of individuals who believe in the systemic impact that ISDM can make, and are excited by the idea, excited by what our students can actually go out and do, and have actually, in some ways, entrusted us with their personal philanthropy. So there are lots and lots of organizations, individuals who are part of that. You can see their list. We have Ashish Dhawan and Pramad Sinha, who are part of the board at ISDM, and they're two people. Ashish is one of the fathers of private equity in India. He was one of the founders of one of the largest private equity firms called Chris Capital, and now works a lot in bringing about systemic change in education in the country. He also runs the Central Square Foundation. Pramad is really one of the best known names in higher education in India today. He was one of the founders of ISB. When it started, he was the first dean there. Ashish and Pramad are also founders of the Ashoka University, which is a big partner with of ISDM and with ISDM. Then besides them, we have a huge academic council and people from a variety of different areas being part of the academic council and really helping frame and develop and design the program and continuously improving on it. We have a board of advisors, who are people we reached out to really soon in our journey, who've been instrumental in actually getting ISDM to where it is. They are people who come from, again, a variety of backgrounds, from being social leaders to social practitioners to being being Magsaysay awardee winners, to being Padma Shri winners, to being corporate leaders. So it's a very rich cross section of people in some ways who've come together to set up ISDM. Something that we strongly believe in is that ISDM has been set up on the basis of collective wisdom and collective philanthropy. I hope that helps answer your question, Noel. You can definitely look up for the names on our website. Preeti, I think you were asking questions around entrepreneurship. So clearly, I think entrepreneurship is one big piece of what we are doing. In fact, term 8, of this 8-term program, one of the elective streams that we are offering this year is around social entrepreneurship. Will Grow, which is a social entrepreneurship organization, has played a key role in actually shaping this entire in this our entire thinking around social entrepreneurship. So it's definitely a key part of what we'll be doing here. A bunch of our students already had started organizations before coming to ISDM and are now looking to take that ahead. There are others who are now thinking of starting their own organizations, either now immediately or looking at taking a few years of experience before definitely starting organizations of their own. Any more questions? Any other areas that that we can share our thoughts on? So Jay says it was a really nice session, helped in clearing doubts about what ISDM is looking for. Thanks. Thank you, Jay. Thank you so much. Preeti, thank you. I'm guessing that, thank you, Paresh. So I'm guessing that there aren't any more questions. If there are, then do reach out to us. You can reach out to, our contact details are on the website. You can write to any of us. So my colleague Sandeep is the one who's organized this. You can write to sandeep.julka@isdm.org.in. You can write to me. My email ID is gaurav.shah@isdm.org.in. And we'd be happy to take up any questions or any thoughts that you might have. So thank you very much, everyone. It's been, sorry, Preeti says, is there a last date for application and when does the course commence? So Preeti, we are doing admissions in a phase-wise manner. The course commences on the 23rd of July. Our admissions happen in a phase-wise manner, and we make offers every phase. So as we speak, out of the batch of 60, about 40 to 50%, I think, of the batch has already been. We've already made offers. So the last date for phase 3, which is going on right now, is the 13th of April. I would always recommend people to apply for earlier phases because it's just, I think it's just easy. It just gets more and more difficult in the later phases because there are fewer scholarships and fewer seats available. So the earlier you apply it, I think it's just easier to make the conversion. Nikita says, is the course outline available online? Yes, Nikita, the course outline is available on our website. You could check it up there. In case you have more questions on the course outline, do reach out to us again. We're happy to help you with that. Rishi, I think Sandeep has just typed out our email IDs, so has Mridul. So you can actually take it up from there. Great. Again, thank you once again. It was an entertaining and fairly interactive 1 hour for me as well. So thank you. Thanks all of you for being here and for participating and for interacting, and hope to hear from all of you soon. Wish you the very best. Take care and all the best.